Welcome back to No Kings on the Hill, where law, policy, and politics collide in real time. I'm Dr. Hill Law. As most of you know, I'm not a lawyer, but a doctor of law and policy, and I'm joined by my co-host, Joe St. Clair. Now, tonight we are breaking down the executive orders in the entire immigration debate. We're going to go over Donald Trump's new visa freeze targeting select third world countries. And obviously, supporters call it a long overdue national security step, and critics are saying that it is an unconstitutional collective punishment, and we will dive deeper into that. Now, and then the second part of our show, we have a lightning round where we'll cover breaking political stories you need to know. We're going to do a lot about Venezuela for that part. This is your space for clarity in a chaotic political world. No spin, no scripts, no kings. Now, for a short word from our sponsor, Q Broadcasting, and we will be right back.
Heard of Q Broadcast? It's taking the world by storm. People are cutting the cord to their high cable bills and moving away from streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and others for something better. Q Broadcast. For just $60 a month, you'll get access to every channel you could ever want, including HBO, Cinemax, and Starz. And the best part? There are no contracts, no hidden fees, and you're free to cancel anytime. With Q Broadcast, you can enjoy streaming live TV, movies, and top series on up to 5 devices at once. Whether you're at home or on the go, Q Broadcast makes sure your entertainment is always at your fingertips. Imagine being able to watch all your favorite channels from anywhere, anytime, without any restrictions. We're talking about thousands of movies, hundreds of TV series, and a huge library of live channels, all in one place. And don't forget video on demand and pay-per-view events. Those are included at no extra cost, so you'll never miss a big event again. Now, take a second and think about your current cable bill. You're probably paying anywhere between $100 and $300 every month, locked into long-term contracts and hit with surprise rate increases. With Q Broadcast, that's a thing of the past. It's just $60 a month. No contracts, no extra fees, no hidden costs, and no price hikes. Why juggle multiple subscriptions like Netflix, Hulu, and cable when Q Broadcast gives you everything you need in one convenient package? People everywhere are switching to Q Broadcast, saving money and getting more content than ever before. So, what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description and sign up for Q Broadcast today. Just $60 a month, no contracts, no hidden fees. It's time to take control of your entertainment and start streaming smarter.
Alrighty, so tonight we are going to be dissecting one of the most dramatic immigration decisions in modern political history, Donald Trump's latest executive order freezing visas from high-risk developing or unstable nations. Now, this move is already reshaping foreign policy, national security, and the 2026 election landscape. We'll outline what the order actually says, how it works, if it's lawful, and what it means for everyday Americans. But here's the question. Is this the start of the new American political doctrine or the opening shot of a global backlash? So stick around. You're going to want to hear our take. And then also, before we jump right in, please take time to visit our website, No Kings on the Hill with drhilllaw.com, that you see streaming across the bottom of the screen there. And from there, you can find all the links to follow our social media pages, where you can follow for daily posts as well as current and past episodes of our show. You can sign up with your email to gain access to our weekly blog and support our show by subscribing to my TikTok page, where you can have access to our Discord chat and weekly subscriber-only lives, where you can ask questions, come up and chat and debate with us. Your supporting and engagement are very valuable to us, and we encourage you to let us know that if there are any topics you would like us to cover or ideas you have, we can use to spice up the show. So, as always, we would like to thank the Patriots Prayer Network for having us on their platform. So please check out all the other hot conservative, political, and Christian content on the network. And so, before I get into my opening, I was just going to say, hey, how you doing, Joe? Let me there.
Not too bad. I'm back from Washington State in Detroit. It's pretty cold here. But yeah,
y'all are getting all the snow.
Yeah, it snowed while I was gone. We've been dealing with the snow since I got back. But yeah, definitely interested in what's going on in Venezuela. think I'm excited. That's probably my topic I'm most excited to talk about today. So,
All right. Oh, I'll get into the segment on the constitutional and the foreign policy, and then we can get to the rest of that. And so I'll bring you back up here in a minute. All right, guys. So, well, let's get to it into it because this is part of the show that goes beyond the headlines, beyond the outrage, and beyond the speculation, and actually explains what this new immigration action does, what the law actually reads like, and what it means for real people on the ground. Now, see, because here's the truth: this is not just a story in the news. This is a fundamental change in how American governs the borders, the way it manages exposure to risk, who it gets to enter or allows to enter the United States, and to grasp with what's going on today. We need to begin with a simple reality. This isn't coming out of nowhere. President Trump had done this in his first term, and now also he had issued a sweeping proclamation back on June 4th, 2025, which blocked or severely restricted visas from 19 countries the administration described as countries of concern. This list included Afghanistan, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, among others with instability, terror risks, or vetting lapses, which is really similar to the one from his first term. Now, the proclamation is the legal foundation for everything happening today. It derives its power from Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, or INA, a law Congress drafted which grants the president the power to suspend the entry of any class of non-citizens if he deems their entry detrimental to the interest of the United States. And the Supreme Court in Trump v. Hawaii confirmed that power. They did not merely uphold, they gave the issue one of the most deferential readings in modern constitutional law. They essentially said that the president gives a facially legitimate national security reason, we don't second guess them. And now here a little later in the show, when we get into our discussion section, I will bring up the actual copy of the Supreme Court case in Trump v. Hawaii, and we'll go over the opinion and read through the opinion on that. So for right now, I'm not going to bring that up, but I will later. So that's the legal landscape. Yet then something changed that sped it all up. Following the DC National Guard shooting, the White House moved quickly and harshly. Trump froze asylum claims for Afghans. He also suspended Afghan visa processing. He directed a government-wide review of green cards for immigrants from those same 19 countries and publicly promised something big, a permanent pause on migration from all third world countries. Now, we've got to protect our nation. We've got to protect our national security. So now let's be specific here. Because this is for credibility, no blanket executive order has been issued for all developing nations. The June 4th order itself is real and binding. The post-shooting measures do exist. The third world expansion is a policy direction, not a final law, not yet. Now, but if that's a legal 212F proclamation, it also will be the largest entry suspension in American history. And now here's why the issue matters legally, politically, and morally. Legally, Section 212 provides President Trump with the most powerful tool any president has to exercise over entry. Put that alongside Article 2, executive power authority, and the Supreme Court's decision in Trump v. Hawaii, and the administration is on solid legal ground. So the answer of if it's constitutional or not is it's constitutional. The administration is also relying on the invasion clause of Article 4, contending that the federal government has a legal obligation to deter mass migration events, and whether you personally agree with that interpretation or not, that is part of the constitutional framework they're using to justify this behavior. Now, obviously, critics, legal scholars, advocacy groups, and human rights organizations are sounding a warning about something else that's not even there, that this policy might actually overrule the immigration categories Congress itself had made, with the result of such policies to impose unequal treatment on some nationalities and to destabilize families, universities, hospitals, and diplomatic partnerships across the globe. And then there is the human side, that aspect that tends to get lost, families separated. Now, students barred from returning to campus, green card holders are afraid to travel, which is ridiculous. Afghan allies who fought alongside American troops are now mired in bureaucratic limbo, which that's not our fault. President Biden should have done better investigations whenever they came over here, because I'll bring Joe back up for this, and I'm going to bring me too, because I personally am a foreign military, so I understand the Afghans that were our interpreters and fought alongside of us, and they did it with great threat to their lives and their families' lives. But not all of them turned out good or were doing it for good reasons. Some of them were doing it just for the money. They weren't doing it because they truly wanted America to come to America to get a better life. Some of them did, some of them didn't. And that's the problem, is we're in the situation we are now. We had the attack on the National Guard, and then it also just came out today that the Delaware Police Department thwarted another planned terrorist attack at Delaware University. So,
Yeah. I think that with the Afghans, I was actually an Afghan translator, and I went to Afghanistan 4 times. But most of the military members that I worked with, that were working with the Afghans, we all knew that they weren't really compatible with what we believe or what we were doing over there. I know that some of the Allied forces were participating in, narcotics trade. They have practices that are called like bachi bazi, which means boy games, where they dress younger children up in clothing, and then obviously engage in sexual acts with them. So this is all occurring right underneath coalition forces' noses. It was well known. So it's really an example of just blowback of this is what happens when we abandon the Constitution and pursue empire and stand up programs that just they're artificially supporting systems that should never existed in the first place. Because it's very, very sad for the Afghans that were there and good people and supported us. I think I don't see myself anymore.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Your stage got messed up for some reason.
Yeah, I think it's sad because there's a lot of people that worked with us to great risk to their own lives, and now now he's gone. He's the magician. And even now that they have family members over there that are at risk, but at the same time, obviously there's some resentment when they come here because they're not being assimilated into our system properly. So, and the guy had CIA connections as well. So I am curious the political blowback that will come from doing this. I know the president clearly has his authority. We've seen it, Guantanamo Bay. I think it was Clinton had Haitian refugees there, and then later Dominican refugees. So when Democrats are in power, this isn't anything in question. The president.
Well, the problem is Biden flew in thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Afghan refugees that worked with the military as they were exiting Afghanistan, put them in camps on the edges of military bases, and tried to just get them off as fast as he could. Now, obviously, I've heard some people try to argue that, oh, this guy got approval on a Trump administration. No, what happened? He had already been here. He had already gotten his visa. His visa got renewed. And the majority of that investigation for the visa renewal had probably happened during the Biden administration, because that takes a long time. Because when you come over here, your visa is not just good forever. It's good for a certain amount of time. And it also happened at the beginning of Trump's administration when half of his administration wasn't even appointed yet. So there's no way to blame this on, oh, it was Trump's fault, because having the National Guard out there, I've seen the left try to say, oh, the National Guard shouldn't have been there. No, that's where our National Guard is supposed to be. They're supposed to protect the homeland. They weren't supposed to be over in Afghanistan, but they're supposed to be here. That's literally where they're supposed to protect us at. That's why they're the National Guard, not the Army.
I think it's also interesting too, because here in Michigan, there's large Muslim population, but the last election they shifted away from Democrats, Kamala Harris, because obviously both sides supported Israel. They were bitter over that. But I think Muslims on whole are largely traditional and would agree with conservatives, if not for the, basically this, it's almost like quid pro quo, where they're getting asylum here and then they're getting social programs. So they're being brought in specifically to be like Democratic voters. I think and obviously like a guy like this, he served his country the best way he could, and he served our country the best way he could. And being brought over here and used as a political pawn is not rewarding. And, I say shame on the guys who recruited him, the intelligence agencies, and promised these people the world when it was never. That's not how our country operates. There's nothing in the Constitution that supported this, all these different types of operations that facilitated this guy getting here and committing this act. This is all blowback for our own decisions.
Yeah, and I think also there's still a lot to find out about this case, about the National Guard part. And that the problem I think that we still got to figure out is, was this what was this some of the left? Because I know right before it happened, also there was a couple Democratic senators that literally, Alyssa Slotkin being one of them, that had said, "Oh, the National Guard's about to start shooting American people on American floors, on America's continent or American cities," which obviously could be another reason. So, I mean, there's a lot, and there's also obviously other questions that we'll address in the full piece. Is the lawful necessary use of presidential power to secure the nation? Now, or has 212F become a constitutional loophole big enough to rewrite the entire immigration system without Congress? So, is this smart policy or blunt force politics in the broadest sense? Obviously, I believe that it's smart policy. Other people may not believe that. And what will the real world effects be on our courts, on our communities, on our economy, and our global status? Because this isn't a matter of slogans. It's about power, law, and people. And that begins right here, right now, right today. And that's securing our country. And to answer that question, we have to start where the framers started, with the Constitution, because that's what this all comes down to. So if you look at the framers' design and the original intent of the Constitution and how the constitutional writing was, is that when the framers debated immigration, they classified it as part of foreign affairs, not internal domestic policy. This matters because in the founders' worldview, the same power that controlled treaties, war, peace, and foreign threats also controlled the admission of foreign nationals. James Madison in Federalist 42 connected immigration directly to national security. Hamilton in Federalist 70 argued that the president must act with energy, decisiveness, and speed when foreign threats are involved. So under the original design, Congress creates immigration categories. The president controls who enters. This is baked into Article 2, the executive power, the take care clause, the responsibility for national security and foreign affairs. From an originalist standpoint, immigration control is a core executive function, period, plain end of discussion. That's what their point is. Now, why 212F fits original intent is Congress codified this design in INA 212. So let's read the key line slowly. Whenever the president finds that the entry of any aliens or of any class of aliens would be detrimental to the interests of the United States, he or she may suspend the entry of all aliens or any class of aliens as they shall deem appropriate. This is not vague. This is not limited. This is not conditional. Congress gave the president a sweeping security tool because the founders believed the executive needed ability and agility to in foreign threat situations. 212 is the statutory embodiment of the framers' original design. And then obviously we have the Supreme Court validation. During President Trump's first term in Trump v. Hawaii, the Supreme Court affirmed that when the president invokes 212F with a national security rationale, courts will not second guess it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pull up. Let me get here on this stage, and I'll go ahead and pull this up. And so when we read this one, let me trying to do this where I can see better. So here, so by its terms, the president has lawfully exercised the broad discretion granting to him under 1182F to suspend the entry of aliens in the United States. By its terms, 1182F excludes deferences to the president in every clause. It entrusts to the president decisions whether and when to suspend entry, whose entry to suspend, for how long, and on what conditions. It is thus vests the president with ample power to impose entry restrictions in addition to those elsewhere enumerated in the INA. Sale 509 U.S. at 187, the proclamation falls well within this comprehensive delegation. The sole prerequisite set forth in 1182F is that the president find that the entry of covered aliens would be detrimental to the interests of the United States. The president has undoubtedly fulfilled that requirement. He first ordered DHS and other agents to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of every single country's compliance with the information and risk assessment baseline. He then issued a proclamation with that extensive findings about the deficiencies and their impact. Based on that review, he found that restricting entry of aliens who could not be vetted with adequate information was in the national interest. Now, President Trump did the same thing this time too. Now, obviously, after the National Guard attack, he sped it up. So, like it says on there, is the courts aren't going to second guess it. His actions for visa freezes, asylum pauses, green card reviews fit directly within that ruling. So now let's talk policy. and the real world outcomes of that. So, security and vetting caps. Many nations on the list cannot verify identities, criminal records, or travel histories if we cannot confirm who someone is. National security requires restraint. Because, I mean, the problem is you, Joe, you were in Afghanistan. Do they have any way to keep criminal records or any type of records as many times as they change power or anything?
Yeah. So no, I think that's probably, yeah. Afghanistan essentially had no central government when we came, and anyone could claim. I learned from Afghans, and many of them didn't even know their own birthdays. That's how they also switched calendars between us. So I've met Afghans that didn't know how old they were within 3 to 5 years. So it's difficult to vet these kind of people, certainly. And I think too, part of the problem is that there was no vetting. It was essentially just, we saw the videos of the planes. It was anybody who could get on, come on over. So yeah, it just like the pullout in Afghanistan wasn't done the right way. I don't think this was done the right way. And
Yeah.
this would have been avoided if we had pulled out correctly.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things like people want to just let everybody in from another country that we literally, like you said, they don't even know their own birthdays or their own birth records. How in the world can we verify that their criminal records? How can we verify their past histories or their past criminal histories or any of their type of ideologies or who they consult with or whoever they hang out with that has that affects their worldview and all that? How can we verify that if literally everything there is done on paper? Some of it's not even done on paper because a lot of the, especially in Afghanistan, that a lot of those areas are still tribal, and they don't go deliver a baby in a regular hospital. They do them at home, and so there's not really a way to get a guaranteed birth certificate printout, and some people don't even have the money to go get the birth records and get all of that stuff, so they go most of their lives without any birth records.
So. Yeah, I'm curious to see what comes out about this specific guy who carried out the attack. But I think this is kind of the pendulum swinging one direction, right? We opened up our borders to let everybody in, and it's now swinging back. And I think this is kind of a moment where we're clamping down and we're saying none of it. I don't think that forever this is going to be the case for these countries. I think that this is a pause, and let's stand up an actual sort of process, which we have in most of the world.
I think we're trying to get back to the way we were since around the early 1900s, where we allowed people in, but we only allowed a certain percentage from each area. We only allowed so many of those a year, so that way. And then some years we lowered it, changed the amount of people from different areas and stuff. So that way we could have time to allow them to assimilate to our society, not necessarily for them to forget their histories or to not remember the histories, but to assimilate to American society, learn the American traditions, learn how to speak English. Because I'm sorry, if you don't want to learn English, if you don't want to learn American traditions, I'm not saying you can't practice your home traditions, but if you can't respect American traditions and sit there and say that, oh, Christmas, this obviously was in the European countries, but there was literally Islamic imam or some social guy that was pretty much saying that, oh, Christmas shouldn't be allowed to be celebrated because it causes Islamophobia. No, you hating Christmas causes Islamophobia, not the fact of Christmas being celebrated. If you would just stay in your own lane and not worry about what other people are doing and not let what other people celebrate affect your life, then nobody would bother you.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting because you're talking about them learning English, right? There's no official language in the United States, obviously, but I lived in Latin America, and I learned Spanish while I was there. So I at least tried to, respect the local culture and, actually live and experience the country the way it's intended. I didn't go there and try to force them to adopt my way of life, right? But while I was in Venezuela, I met probably people from 20 or 30 countries while I was there. And there's a group of 3 guys who were from Yemen and Lebanon. And sadly, they were being held as political hostages in Venezuela. But they cannot speak a lick of Spanish either. And it's kind of sad because their culture is very obviously strong and unified, but it's not so great at adaptability, like
And
other cultures that have immigrated here.
that's my other question is, if you can't, I would not immigrate to France or Spain or Germany or Russia and expect everybody to have something in English and expect everybody to speak English for me. If I'm going to move to one of those countries and live there, I better learn that language before I get there. I better at least learn enough of it that I can get by and get a job and function in a daily life without it. Because also another thing is, I said this last night on a TikTok live, and they were talking about, somebody's talking about, oh, we should just give them money. I was like, okay, you go to, I said, outside of a small amount of migrants who are allowed over for political asylum reasons. I said, you try to go to South Wales or go to Australia and see if you get government help, if you get social welfare. See what happens when you try to go there and live on social welfare, what they'll do. You're going home.
Yeah, I think too, it shows a certain disconnect from reality because on one hand, yes, we want to help everyone as much as we can, but we know it's better to teach a man to fish than give a man a fish, right? You're actually doing him a disservice if you just give him what he needs in the moment rather than teaching him how to be independent and self-sufficient. But they're not also accounting for the fact that, we're not at the point technologically or societally that we have infinite resources. There's finite resources. And, the more people we bring in and split those resources up, they're not realizing like the reason they're paying for inflation, the reason why veteran services, why vets are living on the streets, the reason why you have to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to afford a car or, split an apartment with somebody, and this is for people in their 20s or 30s, is because they're putting more money into these social programs for people who are not from this country in order, and there's a huge chain of other people who are getting, paid off by this. It's people who own the hotels. It's the government administrators and the NGOs that are stood up along next side to these programs. I got job offers for $200,000-$300,000 to go translate for 6 months for Afghan refugees when they all came over. So there's lucrative. I didn't do it. I could have done it, and it would have felt nice to help them on one hand, but then also I would have been making a ton of money at the same time. So yeah.
Yeah, and I mean that's another thing, and this is what I talked about too last night, is there's infrastructure overload. We have immigration courts are overwhelmed. I mean, literally the average immigration judge has about a little over 3,000 cases per judge. That's literally how right now, without the big beautiful bill that expanded the ability for them to hire more immigration judges or to allow higher up people in immigration to become a average do immigration judge work. So, and then on top of that, we got border states are overwhelmed, hospitals and universities and local governments are overwhelmed. A temporary pause allows the system to stabilize and restore lawful order, and also give people time, like we were just saying, to assimilate to the society. Because I'm sorry, if you're going to move to a new country and stuff, you should not be trying to force that country to change to you. You should change to that country. That's just, it's respectful, it's logical, it's common sense, no matter where you go. Like I said, if I was going to say I was going to move to Germany or Italy or France or Russia, I would then learn how to speak their languages and to learn their customs and their cultures. Not to say that I wouldn't still practice some of my own customs and cultures, but I would respect their customs and cultures. So, and then when looking at security policy, must be proactive. Waiting until a threat materializes is not responsible governance. And then looking at the diplomatic leverage, visa access is powerful leverage. Restrictions pursue foreign governments to improve vetting, share intelligence, accept deportees, track criminals, and modernize documentation. Visa policy is not just domestic policy, it is foreign policy. So why this policy stands, when you combine everything, the framers' original intent, Article 2 executive authority, the INA's 212F's explicit delegation, Supreme Court precedent, and national security necessity, you get a policy that is lawful, constitutional, historically grounded, and structurally necessary. This is what the executive is designed to do. This is literally the president's job. Protect the nation, control foreign entry, respond quickly to threats, maintain sovereignty, President Trump's visa freeze and border closure may be controversial, but constitutionally, legally, structurally, it is precisely what the framers built the executive to handle. So that's getting back to that. And that's pretty much that covering that section. We can discuss a little more about it back and forth. And if anybody would like me to show some more of that Supreme Court case, we can, or go over the actual legislative part of it. But it pretty much goes down the fact that this is literally his action is, you can try to say that it's racist or whatever, all this stuff, but there's no way to prove that, because
well, you put it well when you said it's an issue of sovereignty, right?
Yep.
Because if you don't defend this, if you don't defend the union now, if you allow thousands and millions of people in who will vote one direction, or if you allow us to stack our courts, it's like our systems are being attacked from every angle, right? In order for
I know. I'm trying to do something real quick. Hold on a second. I'm trying to see if I can get. Why it's not taking any camera? It's weird. There we go.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So our systems are being attacked from any angle, whether it's from lobbyists paying off our legislators, or foreign interest groups who aren't actually declared foreign interest groups, or whether it is the judiciary who is being paid off by interest groups writing amicus briefs, and then societies like the Federalist Society sponsoring their vacations and buying them gifts, right? We see it from that angle. We also see it from the other angle, where they're trying to bring in a new class of voter to dilute, your sovereignty, to dilute your voting power. And at the end of the day, that is the president's authority to defend the system. This is an existential threat. And it's almost as if they want to gaslight us, like we're a frog in boiling water, and they just keep turning up the temperature. And the more they do it, fortunately, I think enough people are waking up and seeing it and raising the alarm. But then as you do that, that's what they do. They paint you as a radical or a racist. Somehow you hate immigrants, which is not the case. This is nothing anti-immigrant at all, and it has nothing to do with the color of anyone's skin. It is purely, to keep what we have going, as good of a thing as it is,
Well, yeah, and so what people understand is this has, they'll say, because it's mostly Middle Eastern countries. Well, unfortunately, that's a large part of the third world. And President Trump just also yesterday or today added Nigeria and other African countries into that, because of the fact that they are famous, right? Well, right now they're literally killing in thousands and thousands of Christians, and they're doing nothing about it. The Muslims in Africa are just literally, that you can look at it. If you watch over there, there's these mass graves that are like a football field size, the size of a football field, 10 foot deep, piled with caskets. Because they're having so many people killed at once, they literally can't even individually bury them. There's not enough room for somebody to bury them with a headstone. They're having to put them in mass graves, and that is what nobody wants to talk about. Is everybody wants to act like it's Islam that's the religion that's persecuted and whatever. No, it's really Christianity that's the most persecuted religion in the world. It's just not the one that gets the coverage, because it's mainly white or Caucasian descent. Even though that's kind of funny is because Spain, even though a lot of the Spanish people are lighter skin tone, they're not Caucasian descent. And then Mexico is one of the largest. South America, Mexico have the largest amount of Catholic Christians, and are very conservative religious wise. So really, it's not all white people that are Christians. It's all over, but that's the way it gets perceived by the mainstream media and the news, and that's the way they make it look. So blood and racism sells. Anything that happens to white people doesn't sell. So even though there's literally a genocide of white Christians going on in Africa, or even black Christians in Africa, it doesn't matter what color they are. They're killing Christians, period.
Yeah. I think that's simply because these people grew up in this country where Christianity was the dominant or majoritarian, or depending on where you are now, like plurality religion, right? So the type of person that wants to have this social appeal, that has lived such a comfortable life, but is, secretly cheering on political violence, limiting people, that their free speech, these are people that, they worship themselves because deep down they hate themselves. They don't love themselves. So they think they can fill that void of love that they have from themselves and from God by controlling others, dominating others through power. And at one point, we saw in history where it was strong men doing this. And now, given, social norms, they use a different tactic. They themselves say they're the victims, and they castigate, and they say purely because you're Christian or you're from this background, per se, you are bad. And it's black and white thinking. That's actually the root of prejudicial thought and racism. So it's very, very interesting that this entire set of ideology is so fixated on accusing others of what it's guilty of, which is accusing anybody who questions their policies as being racist, which it's just not the case. It's pure projection. It's on a psychological level.
No, and I agree. And the funny thing is I'm going to say this in the closing, but I'm going to say it now too, is to anybody out there who doesn't like President Trump's immigration law, who doesn't like all this, then you know what? Tell your Democratic, even some, maybe if you're a middle of the road Republican, tell your congressional and senators to submit a moderate, middle of the road immigration bill. Because President Trump will listen. He's proven he will. Now, obviously, if it says, okay, we're going to legalize all immigrants that are here, that it's never going to get approved. But if you say, okay, any immigrants that have come over have been here less than 5 years, that came here illegally are deported. Anybody that's been over here 5 to 10 years who came here illegally but has not committed any other crimes, then coming across the border illegally can either gets a path to immigration or goes back into Mexico but gets to the front of the line. And then obviously a amnesty for the dreamers, for children who were brought here for no fault of their own. Then you could get Republicans on board with it. You could get that as a big time immigration bill passed. But if you just say, oh, we're going to legalize everybody, that's not going to work, because anybody that's been here less than 2 years or 4 years should be automatically, honestly, I think while the expedited removal process only covers 2 years, or that if you can prove that so if they were here 2 years, left for 6 months, went out of the country, came back, then technically they haven't been here for a consistent 2 years. So then it resets their time anytime they leave the country and come back. I think that the accelerated deportation immigration should be up to 4 years, 4 or 5 years. And then obviously anybody who's committed a crime. Now, to all these people out there saying that, oh, I see the left that's trying to go out there and say, oh, call the cops if somebody's coming. You know what? I'm sorry, but if you were outside and somebody's wearing a mask and comes up to you trying to arrest you, if they don't have a badge showing, they're not a cop. They're not an ICE agent. They are not a customs agent, because by law, Customs and Border Patrol and ICE agents, any law enforcement officer, what federal or local, has to identify themselves, has to have an identification out. Doesn't mean they have to have a name badge, but they at least have to have a badge showing. Now, obviously, yes, they're covering their faces, but that's not because they want to. It's because all these Democrats out here and all these leftists out here that are doxing them and trying to put their names out, when you don't understand that these cartels will do anything to get their names, and the cartels will go after them and their families. There is
the cartels that threaten them. Have you heard of La Raza? Are you familiar with La Raza as well?
No.
That political movement. So even beyond like fresh migrants here or people who are DACA kids, there's a group of, I guess what we would call like children of first generation immigrants that are American citizens, but also often like dual national Mexicans. And they have this movement called La Raza, and they believe in essentially the western part of the United States, California and Texas, going back to Mexico. They believe it's stolen land, much in the same way that there's the indigenous movement of stolen land, give it back to the natives. So it's interesting because a lot of Latino families, I've lived in Texas. My ex-in-laws were from Mexico. Many Latinos are conservative, but there's a certain class that I've noticed of, I guess you would call like ambitious, educated. So these are people who are going to college as well as graduate school, who, they have a certain level of innate talent, but they're also desiring power, and they have been recruited by and pushed forward by certain political movements that are essentially trying to use that ambition against them, but it's deeply connected to their sense of us versus you. We are Mexican. They are American citizens, but they'll fly the Mexican flag before the American one as well. So, I mean, as much as we denounce the KKK, which we do, as much as we denounce movements like that in our country, like that's, race-based radicalism. Why we need to be more aware of these other movements. They exist within every race and creed. So we're very hyper aware of what's going on in Caucasian and Christian communities, but maybe we should be more so cognizant of those threats emerging from other corners of our society.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get to we're sitting at about 42 or just a couple minutes, so I'll go ahead and give us a little longer on the Venezuelan part. Let's go ahead and get started on that. And I was just going to see if you had saw the news today when we were talking the other day, texting about President Trump putting the airspace, closing the airspace around Venezuela. We found out what that was for. It's because Venezuela was refusing to take deportation flights of their own people back. And Maduro caved today. He started allowing the return of deportees from America to Venezuelan flights, and now the airspace around Venezuela is back open. So President Trump was maybe putting the fear of him of, hey, we might attack you, but it looks like it was more they were back channeling this is what people don't understand is sometimes what you see on the media is not what it really is. Yes, he does that to make him look strong and make him look like he's doing something. But in reality, his people are back channeling with Maduro's people, and they got what they want. Now the airspace is open, and that was for him to keep taking deportation flights from Venezuelan nationals.
I do think I think that's one issue at play. I do think there's going to be land-based operations in Venezuela, maybe not by boots on the ground Americans. I do think that we're going to carry out kinetic strikes because every single asset over there has been aligned for that. And I know that Trump he doesn't play around. The reason his negotiation tactics work is because he's willing to take it to that point. And if you're not, and you say you are, then you've lost your ability to negotiate in that manner. So I think he's being very clear about the direction he's moving. And I was actually wrongfully detained and held hostage in Venezuela from November of 24. It was exactly a week ago, a year ago this week that I was taken, and I was freed by the Trump administration in May. But one thing I learned there is that you do not negotiate with this regime down to food. They will promise you, they will tell you that they're going to do one thing, and the moment that you relent and give them what they want, they'll go right back. Even with food, they would say, "Here, accept this rice. This is all you're going to eat today. If you eat that rice, that's all they're going to give you." So, they're not negotiating in good faith. And I think another thing at play here is that Maduro is highly paranoid. I realized that while I was there. They accuse anybody who's American or European of being in Latin America of being an American spy or agent. So they're hyper vigilant. And I think too, going back to like the Afghan situation where we brought in this Afghan national, I think that this is kind of another example of some blowback on a political, geopolitical level of saying the actions taken by the previous administrations in places like Africa with Gaddafi, where they said, "Hey, surrender. We're not going to harm you." However, they facilitated him being sodomized with a bayonet. So Maduro, Chavez, all of America's enemies saw that. And while Hillary Clinton was laughing about it, this was the message that they delivered to the rest of the world. Do not trust the United States to treat you with kindness if you've opposed them. So that's why Putin is hardlining. That's why Maduro seems to be hardlining, in my opinion.
And honestly, a lot of the Americans in Venezuela probably are CIA, probably are NSA. I mean, that's obviously he has a little bit of a reason to be paranoid about it, but obviously not all of them are. I would say anybody who's working as a NGO, or is there as an NGO, or is there is a media personality, they're probably CIA, or they at least report to the CIA, even if they aren't directly linked to the CIA. Which is why, if you notice, almost every time you hear about somebody being taken in, except for your instance where you were former military, so obviously he would think that, but the majority of almost anybody who's ever been taken, like Russia or North Korea or China or any of that, you notice they're always journalists. They're always journalists, and I'm sorry, while obviously they always deny that they're CIA and they fight to get them back, it can't be that just none of them are CIA. There's got to be and we can look at the history of, and because we talked about this in our last show, that there is literally proof that we talked about this on our previous show, that there's actually proof that the CIA had a good amount of journalists and news personalities on the payroll, that they were literally working for the CIA, not just in the fact of doing foreign countries and foreign propaganda stuff in foreign countries. They were also literally putting out propaganda within the United States and running stories certain ways, or running interference on stories. Because if you sit there and you tell one story one way, but then you have a story come out one way, but then yet another group finds one little hole to make that story look like it's just that the main person in it is not logical or not rational, then you automatically drive that, oh, this is a conspiracy theorist person and whatever, even though it may not be, or the whole thing may be true. Some of it may not be true. Some of it may be true, but they're really good at using obfuscation and all that to make you think that all of it's fake when it's not. And then it's so hard to tell what's real and what's not. And so we get all the time. And it's obviously they say, oh, they claim they shut that down, but we know the CIA doesn't shut anything down. They just adapt.
Yeah. And I think every good lie is built into the truth. So I think I saw that from when I was in Afghanistan, where we'd be on missions, operations, and then we come land in the news. We were on operations where the mother of all bombs was dropped. When we landed, the news reports were reporting that it was somehow a message from Trump to Kim Jong-un. So they already have their narrative that they want. And then obviously, they push that, and regardless of what happens, it's almost as if, regardless of what objectively in reality occurs, if they can make enough people believe the other thing, as long as it's close enough, then that's all they need to do. And regardless of your expertise or your knowledge set, they'll call you conspiracy theorist or suggest that somehow you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, then also sometimes they just do it to make us divided. Sometimes it's not even bringing up conspiracy. It's to try to push a different narrative to make everybody divided, because as our founding fathers and a bunch of other people saying, is a divided nation is a weak nation. I mean, the saying united we stand, divided we fall is so true, and more true than any time in our nation today. I mean, you would have thought after the backlash from Mark Kelly and the Seditious Six that started about almost 2 weeks ago now you're seeing more Democrats coming out and trying to, once again, calling for sedition, calling for the military to come out against, because they want to talk about Pete Hegseth and how they want to try to judge the naval personnel's attack on a boat. And they're like, oh, and even Rand Paul today, I love Rand Paul's policy ideas to a point. The problem is his policy ideas are just too far right. There's just no way that we'll ever get fully back to the way the Constitution was originally meant to be, or the way it's supposed to be. Ever since World War I, and we started pretty much during World War I, the federal government took over as it pretty much became a socialist government. We became a socialist nation with a dictator, and then even in World War II, it got worse. We, and all the administrative agencies that we have now, kind of were built between 1913 and between 1944 and 1945. There's no way we're going to get rid of all that. but he wants to come out and say that, oh, you can't just attack people without, or call them that they're narco terrorists. I can promise you, and obviously you'll know this coming from a intelligence background, but we're not just going and shooting, dropping bomb, wasting $30,000 weapons on a boat that's fishermen. We know what's on that boat. We know who's in that boat, whether it's through land intelligence, whether it's through signals intelligence, whether it's through physical pictures and radar and x-ray and thermal or whatever. And also, these boats aren't your normal fishing boats, your traveling boats. They are what go fast boats. They're boats with hardly any tops on them. They are filled with containers of fuel and drugs, 6, 7, 8 outboard motors on them, going across the open ocean. Nobody travels across the open ocean that way.
You know, I think I do know firsthand that I think that there were instances of the Venezuelan military, acting in a paramilitary fashion and going beyond its borders and grabbing people and holding them hostage. So I think that's another element here, is that as they're tightening the noose around Maduro, obviously there's concentric circles of security. But right now, the first step was closing off, basically that water route, right? And that's what they did. And now there's no path out by air. And I think it was Sunday night, there had been 5 days for this is like the first time in 3 years that Maduro hadn't been seen for 5 days. And shortly after the NOTAM shutting down the airspace came out, there was no air traffic from Venezuela capital, Caracas, except for one on Sunday afternoon. That was the presidential plane flying towards the Brazilian border. So I think that was an example of the Venezuelans engaging in psyops, trying to kind of sow the idea that Maduro had fled to see how the world would react. But shortly thereafter, he appeared in Caracas and basically said that he was going to stay there no matter what. I think he's also he can't just leave, because if he were to decide to flee, I don't think his generals would allow that, right? Even if he wanted to fly out of there, there's no way for him to abandon the country with his life. They would surely mutiny against him. So it seems like a very tough situation to be in for him.
Well, I don't know. I think we've got a pretty good idea of who are the people within Maduro's regime who are just hardliners, who are Maduro and communism to the T and would want to take over them. And then I'm sure we know who are the people that are just more of, they go along to get along because they don't want to be living in poverty. They don't want to be living in that. And that as soon as Maduro was gone, they would get behind whoever the guy that was elected president, that is recognized as the Venezuelan president by almost every nation in the world, or at least every developed nation in the world. They would get behind him right away. And I'm sure that's probably one of the reasons why we're down there so close, is because some of the intelligence that we can't get off the ground, we can get from being out in international waters, being that close. And did you hear about, I think it was here a week ago, that Maduro was being such a petulant child that they were running drills, but they were literally just sitting there firing all this ammunition out into the water like they were going to hit the ammo couldn't even travel as far off as the ships were, but they were going to get
Well, one thing I will say is that I was held in Maduro's personal political prison, and I met their director of their CIA and SA. He was the person who had me in the head of the bag as I was getting taken out to the private plane when I was flown out. But what I realized is that this is not a government at all, in my opinion. And I think this is a great example of the fact that under Chavez, they were actually socialists, but under Maduro, he was a bus driver, and his only instinct is political instinct. And he's abandoned the hardline socialists and Chavistas. And he's also gone against everyone other than those who are personally loyal to him, which are certain military generals that are directly selling drugs, kidnapping and extorting people, stealing land, things like that. And from me talking to them, I can tell you right now, this is like if you imagined a group of thugs in the hood. Like, this is how they act. This is the kind of people that they have in their CIA, their military intelligence. They have no ability other than hold a gun to somebody's face and say, "Open your phone." So it's not a high-level sophisticated government at all. It's this. You think the system of extraction is bad in the United States? They're all anti-capitalist, like Eat the Rich here. They don't even pretend to be socialists at all. They just are actively robbing people and laughing in their faces. And again, the people in the United States don't know this because they're spoon-fed information, and nobody gets out to the world and travels and experiences the world and actually understands like what's going on in a place like Venezuela.
And they never watch foreign news. They always just take whatever little bit of foreign news that gets heard from here. They don't find ways to get actual news. And that's another problem and it's hard to sometimes unless you know where to go, because a lot of the news that comes out of those countries is highly, highly controlled. The news that's really going on there doesn't get out because that's the way they have it. They are highly controlled on where it goes. So that's the other thing there too, is people think they know what's going on in other countries, but they don't, because even to these algorithms with TikTok and everything, when every once in a while you'll see somebody from Europe or Canada or whatever pop up on a US TikTok live or whatever, those TikTok knows those people are die hard for their country. They know that they are a English socialist or an English whatever to the T, and that's why they let them over. They don't let the people who will actually sit there and go against or say stuff against that nation or say anything against it, because they don't want you hearing the truth. But all right, well, I'm going to go ahead, and for anybody who's watching it, would be watching this on Q, we're in it right now. If we want to go a little bit longer, we can, since they will cut it, and then I can just go ahead and do the outro, the closing real quick, and then we can get back to discussion just for the Q. All right. So let me go to this. And all right. So, well, we're almost out of time. So my hill to die on this week is simple. The Constitution matters. Whether you agree with President Trump's immigration policy or not, the Constitution and the Supreme Court support the president's broad authority in this area. So if you don't like it, then ask your representative to propose an immigration reform bill. Until then, stop whining, because you're doing nothing. All you're doing is causing trouble and going to cause issues and make everything worse for everybody in the United States. Quit trying to start and sow dissent. That doesn't help. Now, also, please don't forget to check out our website that you see scrolling across the bottom of the screen, and subscribe or follow all of our social media pages on the homepage, and sign up for free to gain access to our weekly blog posts there on the website. We're also looking into getting t-shirts, hats, mugs, and hoodies made with our logo on them. And then also, please don't forget to join us every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on the Patriots Para Network, on Q Broadcasting, or on YouTube, X, Rumble, Twitch, and Facebook. So everybody that's watching us on Q right now, good night. Hope you have a blessed day, and stay informed. All right. So for everybody who's not on Q, we're going to go a little bit longer and have a little more discussion is how to do that, because this is actually broadcasted on a channel that's on the actual broadcasting network. So I don't want to leave a big 10, 15, 20-minute discussion in between that and actually doing the closing, so they're not having to edit a lot, because now they can just cut it off at the end.
Right.
But yeah.
One thing I was watching on some Spanish TikTok from Venezuela is there's a couple of reports. One of Maduro's rallies this week, he was recorded saying Trump had denied his second phone call, and then he gets on stage and he tells Donald Trump in Spanish, he says, "Hey, if you want to know who is bringing all the Venezuelan criminals into your country, just ask the Biden administration and look into their offices in Colombia." So I think that's an interesting development. And obviously Maduro is a dictator. We have to take what he says with a grain of salt. But interesting political development. Definitely. I mean, that'd be interesting if Donald Trump and Maduro joined forces and say, "Hey, look who is really facilitating our worst criminals going to your country." But he actually acknowledged it out loud, and I heard it in Spanish. So it's kind of funny because there's this whole denial of Tren del Agua and all these people essentially coming here and infiltrating.
Yeah. What I like is the plan President Trump announced yesterday during his cabinet meeting and after, about the new child savings plan that the company is going to invest into. Because honestly, that was one of my ideas of how to save Social Security without keeping Social Security, is to go back to the way it was originally supposed to be and have it be individual child accounts, starting out with the children. And now, obviously, right now, parents can just put money into it and the companies match or will put some in to match it. What I think it needs to be is it needs to set up to where instead of money coming out of their paychecks for Social Security, the money is actually coming out of their checks and going into that account for their children. And that's their personal account, like a 401k account, not controlled by the government, not where the government can borrow from it, not where the government can take from it, but where they control the investments of it and everything. And that it just has similar rules to like a 401k that you can only touch it for certain things like down payment on a house, college, whatever, without any major tax penalties or anything like that. So that way there's it helps people, and we don't have to worry about, because I forgot what they were saying on the average investment, but pretty much it would be to where by the time they were in their 50s or 60s, it'd be over $2-3 million. And because right now, Social Security, the way we're going in 2034, it is going to be insolvent. And they're going to, if they can't fix it or find out a way to fix that or get it done. And obviously that's another push behind getting all these illegals shut down and getting all this corruption and waste and fraud and abuse down, is that once that account goes bankrupt and they have to start borrowing money to pay it, they have to cut the payments 20%.
Yeah, I think they're going to continue kicking that football for as long as they can and just let the future, Congress and president deal with it.
But I think that's what Trump's kind of the account that he did, that was what it was for.
I saw Michael, it was Dell, the guy from the founder of Dell. He donated a bunch of money. My one thing, whenever I see them putting in money, like the military at one point had a 20-year retirement plan. That was the case for 10 years while I was in. I'm sure that was the case when you were in, right? And did you see they shifted in 2020 or 2019, 18, around that time to, the TSP, where they would do matching. So now your retirement's tied to these investments. And I would say, like, on one hand, it's like everything has to go through these like private investing schemes, but I almost prefer, if we're going to put like all this money into the stock market, at least let the future kids of America own it, as opposed to what's going on now, which is,
and that's
everybody's
the
retirement,
Yeah, and that's the way Trump's account's set up, is it's an individual account for that child managed by the parents. It's not controlled by the government. It's not, and that's originally how Social Security was supposed to be, is every person was supposed to have their own account. It was supposed to be separate from the account, but then it eventually ended up getting wrapped into the government as one major account. And that's what we've got to get away from. And that's why we're in the situation. One of the reasons why we're in the situation now is, and I think this is another reason why the left thinks, if we just flood a bunch of people in here, we can solve the solution of the Social Security problem, is because the fact that, Hispanics and Middle Easterns, they're still reproducing on an average of like 2.5 or 3.6 children per family. Caucasians or whites or Americans are down to around 1.2 or 1.3, which means we're not even reproducing enough to maintain our population, meaning in a couple decades, we will be the minority, and in a couple generations, we'll fail to exist. We'll die off. I mean, if we don't start reproducing more, because I think the statistical number for just a break even, so your population doesn't decrease any, is 1.5 children per family. And then, but if you look at your Middle Eastern families, your Hispanic families, they're around 2.5, almost 3.5% children per family. So I think that's kind of the Democrats' idea is, if we just throw all these people in here and have these big families, because that was the problem, is when Social Security started, it was like, I think the average child per family back then was closer to 2, and now it's 1.2. And so when Social Security originally came out, you had 5 people paying in to every one retiree. Now you have like 1.5 people paying in to every retiree.
Yeah.
So more is coming out than what's going in.
Yeah, they used it as a slush fund too for a bunch of different stuff over the years. So yeah, it's kind of sad, because you're sending that debt is going forward to future generations. I think that's affected my generation as well, just with inflation. But yeah,
and I know this guy. I don't know if he was trolling last night. I swear he had to be trolling, but if he wasn't, it just makes, he was like, they can just print more money. I'm like, no, you print money, you cause inflation. I'm like, the only way for America to just keep printing money and not have to worry about the debt and it keep going up and there not being a zero-sum game or whatever you want to call it, is if there was one world order deciding what is economically economic and what is money. As long as there is other competing countries, then you don't get to decide, and you're going to owe that debt. And we get above a certain debt, and it's going to be a no point of return. And I mean, right now, everybody goes, "Oh, we're $34 trillion in debt." No, we're roughly about $158 trillion in debt when you account all the other stuff like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. The 34 trillion is just actual payments that we have right now. It's not future debt that's already promised. That's just current debt on the books right now that we're having to pay interest payments on. If you actually take all the stuff that we owe, and they're like, "Oh, well, he was trying to argue like, oh, we have, the government owns land and this and that and this and that." And says, what? So you're saying we're going to sell America, give it away to pay back our debt? I mean, really? Come on, dude. Are you that ignorant?
They also have the theory of like the network effect, where they say there's a certain inherent value to the complexity of our system. So they'll come up with some, BS financial tool to get around it. I know they've talked about printing $1 trillion coin. Have you heard about that? The platinum coin.
No, that's not going to work.
And then just putting it in a museum, printing it, paying it off, putting it in a museum. It's just like, if we're to that point, what's that?
I think eventually we'll all end up going to Doge, going over to digital coins, and that's how we'll get away from the.
You're probably right.
That's how we get out of the debt.
You're probably right. And on one hand, I'm like, okay, that's fine. On the other hand, I'm like, we were warned about this in the Book of Revelation. don't fall for it. But how do we not? Like, what do we do? I don't know. Just use cash, start trading. I mean, homestead. That's the logical conclusion, right? Is to homestead and start like self-sufficient communities. Yeah. And not use a digital dollar and make sure that you're not dependent on a supply chain living in some suburban or urban environment, 15-minute city. But how do we organize that? And I don't even think it's possible at this point. I think they've shut it down already.
Yeah, not with the amount of people we have, and not the amount of, I mean, we have a bunch of land that could be lived on, but it's all protected.
We need like a neo-Amish movement where we're like, okay, technology's cool up to this point, so maybe we don't use social media on 15-year-olds, I don't know.
They actually were talking about, there's a law opposed right now that would make it illegal for anybody under the age of 16 to have social media. And there's also another big movement of these digital home phones, of these like home phones that work off of your like cell phone or whatever, but they're just a regular hand, like you have to actually pick the phone up and call somebody, and like an actual old house phone.
It seems like a scheme to sell more bullshit.
It's not. It's so the kids can still talk, but not. It's so the kids can have a phone to call their friends, but can't actually have a smartphone.
Oh, you're talking about one of those dumb phones. Okay, yeah.
But it's not a dumb phone. It's actually like a house phone, like with the little key, with the little keys on it, with where you actually pick the phone up off of the ringer and dial the number.
I don't know if kids are going to want to use that.
They've started getting a little more popular. Okay. And then what I think is funny is the Democrats are showing how desperate are they today. So obviously they got the Epstein release like they wanted. Trump's name was not in there in any sort of way or fashion that made it detrimental to him, which is obviously why Biden and Harris never released him. And the only people it was detrimental to were powerful Democrats. So all of a sudden now you hear nobody talking about Epstein, except for some reason today the Democrats decided they wanted to release pictures of Epstein Island. And I'm like, what is that going to do? Really?
I don't know.
I'm like, they're right now, they're just throwing everything at the wall they can until they get something to stick. Obviously they're going after Pete Hegseth because they feel he's weak as far as he's not as rich, and they don't think he can stand up to the type of stuff that Trump can. They don't think he can withstand.
I think that's not even about him. I think what they're subtly communicating to the military is, if we get back into power and you like, we're going to prosecute you all Like they already we know they've used lawfare against Republican politicians, and now they're threatening the service members. Starting with Hexeth, and he's not a service member, but as Secretary of War, that's your linchpin. That's what they're communicating. So I think they think the opposite is happening because we cleared Trump administration cleared house on the DEI generals, which I think that's a great thing, right? We don't want political activists in our roles or selected as being better than others when it's a position like general, which is so critical to national defense and to the actual protection of our country. And
we don't want to DI anybody, because I'm sorry, but when you're out there, I don't care if a woman's out there with me, but she better be able to pick me up and drag me just like a male soldier has to. If she can't meet the exact same standards as a male soldier for her age, then she should not be out there, because she is a danger to her and her fellow soldiers, period.
Well, I think the military just now cleared house on all, essentially, the left-leaning, higher brass, Democrat, agenda-pushing yes men that got their positions for playing into that. And now the Democrats realize when they get to power, the military is not going to be, listening to them, and maybe the way it was before. And it's not as though they can just bring these people who already retired back in. There's an entire generation. There's going to be a 4-year generation where none of the people that they wanted promoted were in the military. So now, understanding that, it's like they're pointing this gun of lawfare at the individual military members, saying, what you're doing today, we're going to prosecute you for in 4 years, which they're not doing anything novel. This was not questioned under Obama. This was not questioned even under Bush. Supreme Court has rolled off on these issues. Congress, like that. This is not.
Military is not the place for DEI. The military is there to protect us. They are there to keep our country free, and to help protect other nations when they are in dire need or dire strain of being wiped out or a genocide happening. That's what our military is there for. It is not there to be all hubby bubby and perfect and DI and white woke and all this stuff. No. And the part of, generals, it shouldn't matter if they're fat or not. They're never out in the field. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Does a football player want to listen to a fat coach tell them how to get in shape? No. You're going to respect a coach that is actually in shape, trying to tell you how to get in shape. When you're young, whenever you're like somebody sitting there and telling you to do all this stuff, but they couldn't get off the couch, it makes you not want to listen to them. It's the fact of they need to be able to exude the exact type of quality of leadership. They need to be able to mimic that and show the leadership that they're trying to get everybody else to follow. If they want somebody else to meet standards, they need to meet those standards themselves. That's just common sense.
And it's so important too, because the military is kind of like, it's the intersection between our government, our country, our state, and the actual physical world in many ways. Because the job of the military is break stuff. They say this all the time, and to kill people. And I'm perfectly okay with the military that represents cross sections of American society. I don't want a military dominated only by coastal elites, and I don't want an all-white military. I don't want it to be a military of all men or anything like that. But at the same time, when it comes to who's getting promoted, who is actually proficient at their job, when I was in, I noticed within my career field, we were translators, and the people who are best at the language were not rewarded. When I was in the military, you were targeted, if anything, because you were the biggest competition for the other people. And it was the people doing bake sales. It was the people doing bake sales for whatever issue of the week it was, XYZ History Month. Right. Those were the people getting promoted, while the people who actually were doing the job that they came and joined the military to do were being forgotten. And it hollowed out our forces for a long time. I think probably you saw that too, Jeremy, right?
Oh no, when I was in, they had just started getting the stress cards, but our drill sergeant said, "You pull a stress card, I'll make you stressed, all right."
What year did you go in?
02.
02? Okay. The Air Force didn't have stress cards when I went in, but I think 6 months after I was out of basic training, that's when they had their sexual scandal, the Air Force, and that's when I went back 6 years later, and these guys were getting Burger King during basic training. I was going, "What is going on?"
Well, now when I was in basic training, they didn't have Burger King, but you had the fat kids line, you had the regular line. If you were meeting your weight, you were meeting your PT, then you could have ice cream, hamburgers, whatever the heck you wanted. If you were not meeting your runs, not meeting your PT, you were overweight, then you got to eat grilled chicken and salads or fish. I mean, they had two separate lines. I mean, you could, if you were meeting your PT and your weight, then you could eat in either line you wanted. But that we definitely didn't have Burger King or anything like that. It was just regular chow line food. And I mean,
when I went through, they had it, the Burger King that people could eat when you graduate with your family, but you didn't go there during training. And then
you could go to AIT side, but not basic. I mean, AIT got access to all of that, but not.
In the Air Force basic training base, there's AIT with the basic people kind of mixed in. So, it's a little.
Well, in mine, the only time where I was at Fort Sill, the only time you went to the AIT side is if you were going to medical.
Okay.
You had to go to AIT to go to medical, but other than that, basic was on the basic side. You were over on your own little side. You had. Obviously, you had everybody went to, even if you weren't religious, you went to church on Sundays because it was the only time that you could get away from the drill sergeants and have that freedom.
Yeah, I remember people going to church, like 8 different churches.
And everybody went to the Catholic one because it was the only way you could get wine.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Wine during communion.
Oh, wow. No. Okay, I was 18. I wouldn't have done that. I got to get going here in a little bit. I think I'm going to have to hit the gym here before it closes. So I don't know if we want to wrap up. We already did our closing statement.
We can go ahead and wrap up. I already said the closing statement. So anybody that's still on, we'd like to thank y'all for tuning in. Please check our website. I know Joe has been looking at some designs and stuff with shirts and everything. What we're thinking of, and this is what I was thinking of, Joe, is that we can have, if we start having a bunch of people start doing subscriptions, if I get the website set up to do subscribers, that when they order a shirt or a hat to wear themselves, it has a QR code on the back, not just for the website, but also that's actually like directly meant to them. So if somebody scans that QR code, goes to the website, and then actually ends up watching and signs up, subscribes, then they get like a free month subscription. But also that way that any shirt or hat they buy or whatever mug, whether hoodie or shirt, has that QR code on back. So if anybody's like, who's that? They can see it's just right there. They can just take a picture of the QR code and it takes them directly to the website.
Some stuff out. Definitely.
Yep.
I use Amazon merch. I don't know what we could do with that. We'll see. But yeah, sounds like a plan.
Yeah, I think I got to double check with the website, but I'm pretty sure there's a way to add merch to it and everything. So,
okay, cool.
All righty, man. Well,
till next week. See you later.
See y'all next week. Anybody watching, please check us out every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific on the Patriot Prayer Network. And thank you for joining in. We really appreciate you. Please, like I said, go to www.nokingsonthehillwithdrhillaw.com. Check our website out. There you can subscribe for free with the email to get access to our blog. Also, please leave us in message there or comments if you have any content you would like us to cover, any ideas of maybe a structure you'd like to see on the changed on the show. And have a great Wednesday night. See y'all next week.